Welcome. This is our very first professional podcast with Ascend and BAP. My name is Tiffany Chen, and I'm the current Executive Vice President of Ascend Baruch. Oleg?
Hi, my name is Alexander Pristovoit. I am the current Vice President of Professional Events at Beta Alpha Psi.
Today we have a really special guest with us. Jason, I would like for you to introduce yourself, Brainceek, and also just provide us with a very fun fact about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Jason. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Brainceek. Long story short is I graduated from Baruch in 2011. Seems like quite a while ago. Afterwards, I went on to Morgan Stanley Credit, followed by Jefferies Investment Banking, and then went to Columbia Business School for my MBA. Afterwards, or during MBA, I kind of, created Brainceek, where we simulate jobs so that anyone with any type of background could try out different jobs and see if it's the right fit for them or not. Long story short is it really came from my experiences at Baruch, where everyone spoke about investment banking, everyone spoke about finance, everyone spoke about accounting, etc. And there was such a huge push for it, and we memorized all the answers to study guides, to vault guides, 400 questions, etc. And I would go in and I would say, hey, look, I want to be part of a fast-paced environment where I can learn a lot and be able to contribute accordingly. But honestly speaking, I had no idea what investment banking was. And I had no idea what any of those jobs were. We were just kind of freestyling and memorizing answers and going into interviews. So I really wanted to solve that problem the second time around, just because I was recruiting as well for different types of jobs. I was saying, hey, what do I want to do for the next 20 years of my career? And there's no way to just try out jobs to see if it's the right fit or not. So I thought back to my problem during Baruch as well as during Columbia. And I said, all right, you know what? Why don't we simulate the job so that people could try it out, see what it's like, and then go from there. So this really is what we've been on a mission to do ever since we've been working with corporate partners such as Evercore, Goldman Sachs, etc. Been working with nonprofits as well as universities such as Baruch. We host simulations for FLP as well as other graduate centers. So that's what we've been doing. And a fun fact about myself, I used to be a huge sneakerhead. So I had over 80 pairs of sneakers. That's what I used to do. Have sold most of them ever since, but that's my fun fact. So
That is quite a collection. Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. Just to go over some of the event agenda that we have planned for our podcast today, we'll do a very short storytelling activity, followed by some questions that we have for Jason, for Brainceek as a startup as well. Then we'll go on to another short activity, which is rapid, honest questions. These questions were not disclosed to Jason prior to this podcast, so we'll definitely kind of keep Jason on his toes for these questions. Then we'll end it off with some Brainceek opportunities. This will basically be an open floor for Jason to talk about ways that students can get involved with Brainceek, with startups overall. So let's go on to our very first activity, storytelling. So we have two words that I've already picked out of a hat that we would like Jason to use to describe a time that he experienced the word. So the first word is motivation. So Jason, can you just tell us a time where you've experienced motivation or you were motivated and provide some explanation to this word?
I think Tiffany, to be honest with you, I think motivation changed a lot for me over the past few years. I think when I was in Baruch, and a few years out, I used to always use competition as motivation. So I would look at what my friends are doing. I would look at, what other peers are doing. I was so crazy that I used to look on LinkedIn and just look at random people. Honestly, just random people, and it would motivate the crap out of me. I would look at them and I would be like, okay, they're my age and they're just a couple of years older. How do I get to where they are? And I think it kind of, that was a path where I felt like was a little bit, I would say I matured ever since from that path. And now for me, motivation is really the standards that I set for myself. So last week we had we had an incident where we had to work with different banks, and all the different banks had different firewalls due to Zoom and such. And it kind of required that I pull like an all-nighter as well as, continuously work and such. And now the motivation comes from, okay, do you want to be great? Who are you as a person? And I would ask myself during the all-nighter, I would say, hey, Jason, who are you as a person? What's your identity? Are you great or not? That's kind of the motivation. It's really to be great, to strive for, creating something that helps the entire world, not just helps a few universities, etc. So that becomes that motivation. It's something that you set for yourself. I'm not saying anything is wrong or anything, but I would say that this is more of a healthier version of motivation for me now. So.
Thank you. About you, Alex, what do you think is some point in your life where you felt motivated, or there was that aspect of motivation?
Right. I feel like for me, it's been a collection of things. I would assume the biggest one is being an immigrant in the United States. It's always been kind of me looking up to America as like the land of the free, and you can kind of do whatever you want and achieve anything you really can. Like all doors are there for you to knock into. That has altered, I guess, over time, depending on what I do. As Jason mentioned, I can really relate to the competition aspect of motivation. For example, when I was in high school, I was on the wrestling team, and there was a lot of kind of detail, or there was a lot of obstacles in my path to kind of get where I wanted to go. But I just kept on pushing and telling myself that I have to be the best. And first it was my weight class, then my team, then say the borough, then the city. And that's what kind of kept me going, kept me pushing. Now it's more of a, it's still more of that competition, but now I'm focused on challenging myself and challenging on being better tomorrow than I am today, and being better the next day than I am tomorrow. So it is there is the challenge, but it's also, as Jason mentioned, it's more of it's less of it's more like a friendly, if you will, kind of competition rather than anything more than that.
So you're saying my competition is not healthy anymore. It's not friendly.
No, I'm not. No,
you're
that's
looking
not
at
LinkedIn. Because the last thing you mentioned was how it's a better type of competition. I can definitely relate to that, because before, like, I was always like, oh, I have to, because it's in wrestling, like, as the example I gave, it's a physical sport, right? So it's more of like, I'm gonna beat him, right? Not like I'm gonna beat him up, but like, I'm gonna beat him. There's always a winner and a loser. There can't be a tie, right? But now that has changed, right? I've left wrestling and now I'm focused on, the business side of things, the accounting and stuff like that.
I agree. I'm just teasing you.
You guys gave great examples in terms of motivation, and it goes to show that motivation can come in very different forms, for Jason, and looking up people on LinkedIn, and for Olex, and being an immigrant, and battling that kind of wrestling. Moving on to the second word that I had in mind, when it comes to failure, Jason, what aspect of your life have you experienced failure? This can be, besides Brainceek, just overall in your life, a moment that really stood out to you, and it really shows failure as a word.
I would, quite frankly, I would say, just being 100% honest, I would say, around that same time. So, there's kind of a 27 when I was like 26, 27. Before that, there was my thought of failure before that, and then there's a thought of failure afterwards. When post Brainceek, I would say before that, I thought of failure just like a lot of people, I guess, that I know, where it's a really bad thing. You try to avoid it at all costs, etc. And if the audience is similar to who I was during college, I would say that that's probably how I would have thought about it too. Then there's a failure afterwards. Afterwards, now it's when I saw the question, to be honest with you, I was thinking it's very hard for me to say failure in a negative way. And I really view it, I don't view it as failure. I don't even, it happens every single day, as a matter of fact. And I would say from a small perspective, you email someone and, you probably said the wrong thing, or not wrong words or anything, but, it could have been better, etc. And you just, you learn from that perspective. But before, I would say, to answer your question a little bit, from the first perspective, yeah, I used to, I failed many times. I failed during Baruch. Morgan Stanley credit was my first and only offer that I received there. During Baruch, I didn't know about internships until junior year. End of junior year, July, I realized people were getting something called internships. And my friend basically introduced me, to an investment bank as a temp worker. And then right afterwards, I, just like many Baruch students, I embellished a little bit, said that I was an investment banking intern. In reality, I was a data temp, and kind of taught myself, modeling, etc., put it on a resume. And then kind of moved on to this place called Midcap Advisors. Long story short, they asked me, did I know modeling? I said, yes, I did. And not really, I didn't know modeling at all. So the first few days on the job were super tough. The biggest failure was the second year. So I delayed my graduation in order to kind of be a junior again, just because, companies only hire for junior summers for some reason. And I used to apply so many times. My friends and I, we would get 60, 100 rejections. And this was 2011, 2 years post 2009. So, and Baruch now, you could get so many good opportunities. Before, I guess all the old people like to say before, during their times, they had it tougher. But anyways, it got to the point where we thought we were idiots. We really thought we were saying to ourselves, why doesn't anyone like us? And ultimately we, it really took a lot of encouragement from, my friends, close friends, etc., to say, hey, look, if we could do it, you can too. And two is, you only need one offer. You only need that one company to like you to go for it. And yeah, finally, Morgan Stanley credit came through on OCR. I didn't even want to go at that time, to be honest with you. And the rest was, I guess you could say, history. But yeah.
Thank you so much for Jason. I think that's a really good story in terms of failure. I think for students now, younger students, upperclassmen, like they are experiencing the very same thing you've experienced, several years in the past, having that rejection and looking for those acceptance letters and putting in those hours to submit applications, recruiting, sending out coffee chats. So I definitely do think students can understand the struggles and that failure that you've experienced. Well, we are kind of short on time, so we can move on to the very next segment, which is our main segment. We'll be asking Jason some questions about his experience as a co-founder of Brainceek, as well as Brainceek as a startup. Alex, do you mind asking the very first question that we have?
Yeah, of course. So Jason, did you ever think that you would start your own business?
Honestly, no. I'm being honest with you. I grew up thinking I always wanted to be a boss. I'm not gonna lie. I always dreamed about just working for someone, working at a big company, and just I always the picture growing up was always me in a conference room, telling a bunch of people like the commercials and TV and such. I never thought about starting a company at all. It's been an amazing journey, and I think once I got started, that's when I said, you know what, if Zuckerberg could do it, if Bill Gates could do it, Steve Jobs could do it, Elon could do it, I can do it too. I mean, they might have different circumstances and such, but I owe it to myself to get going on this. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But at least you had that I want to be my own boss mentality from the beginning. It wasn't you went through investment banking and you're like, oh no, I want to be my own boss. You had that beforehand, right?
I did. So I think I wanted to be a boss for sure. Probably not my boss. But during high school, I kind of I did not do well during high school at all. I was almost a dropout. But I had a fake clothing business where I sold fake clothes to online or other individuals, etc. And I guess if you tie both of them together, that becomes kind of entrepreneurship in a nutshell. So
fair enough. All right, our next question is for students who want to become entrepreneurs, where can they start and what can they do to start?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue, to be quite frank, is when I first started, I think you have this concept in your mind that it's always about a business plan, or it's always about like putting together a deck presentation and thinking everything through, etc. That is pure garbage. That is not the way to start it at all. And okay, if you don't believe me, feel free to, Elon Musk says the same thing. It's because when I first started Brainceek, I spent 3 months kind of putting together a business plan, a presentation, thought about every single aspect of it. And it used to be a mentorship on demand thing where, if you wanted a mentor, you kind of, clicked on a button and a mentor came. But long story short is, and I carried it around for 3 months, just iterating it every single day, etc. Long story short is, I then learned about this thing called lean methodology, where one of my mentors said, hey, why don't you just go out there, see if that's what the students want or not, interview each student, do a customer discovery interview and say, is your product something that's needed? Did it for one day, went around Baruch actually, as well as Columbia, but went around Baruch, and the students, I quickly realized that while, say, 40% of the students wanted a mentorship on demand, the rest of the students, the bigger pain point is no one knew what the jobs were at all. So immediately that day, at the end of it, that entire business plan just went out the window. It was gone. Like it's worthless now. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're interested in entrepreneurship, the biggest thing to keep in mind is it's doing. It's not strategizing. There is strategizing, but your strategizing has to be 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. The rest of the time is doing. So figure out what you're interested in, what kind of problem you want to tackle, figure out your solution, and then go interview some people or put together an MVP. Either it's drawing or some sort of like fake website or something. You could pay Squarespace $5 or $10 to create a website and just blast it out and see where it goes. I think that's to me, if I were to do it again, that's the way I would do it.
I see. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I'll pass it over to Tiffany for the next questions.
Cool.
Yeah. So Jason, I think what you mentioned for the previous question, a lot of entrepreneurship students who are currently at Baruch definitely feel that struggle, whether when it comes to entrepreneurship, it's the idea that comes to my head personally is, you have to come up with a business model, business process, have something that's unique, maybe even revolutionary to their industry. And there's a lot of pressure when it comes to that word, essentially. So I definitely understand how it's difficult for entrepreneurs to kind of come up with that business model, business process. And I think you put it in really great words and, concisely. In terms of,
Oh, I do want to add to that a little bit. I think in terms of the business model and process, right? The other thing is you have to view it as kind of a journey. So if Facebook knew how to monetize it the first day, I'm sure Zuckerberg did not know how to monetize anything at all. He was just trying to get users. And they didn't monetize until, say, 5-6 years later, or almost near IPO, that they start monetizing off of ads. So what I'm saying is, the goal is to see if there is a service that people will look into, that people will use. Then you think about monetizing or something along those lines. Because especially for an innovative product, like if you have a restaurant, yes, you charge people for the food, etc. If you have an innovative product, like let's just say Time Machine, there's no, how do you monetize that, right? Like, but you build it because you know people will use it, and then you think about the other problems later. So that's a
great analogy. I think definitely shows, it's not all about the money at the very beginning, but more of whether it fills an industry and whether there's a demand for it. So definitely agree with that. Going to our next question, what does it really mean to be a startup? This word has become used as an umbrella term for kind of companies that want to be seen as new, unique, even revolutionary. So does Brainceek embody any of these adjectives? And if not, would you use other words to describe Brainceek?
I would say, I'll leave that to the audience in terms of what they think. I would say that what we do is we, virtually simulate jobs so that you could try it out within 30 minutes to 3 hours. To me, I mean, obviously, given that I'm the co-founder, I'm very biased towards what I think they fit in terms of these three adjectives. I do think that, from a startup perspective, I think it's the pure terminology is company that's growing really quickly. Typically, it's a new company that's growing quickly that is funded either by VCs, angels, etc. I think that's the pure terminology, but I want people to kind of take their minds off of that a little bit and think about, you don't have to go into a startup. You could, be very successful opening a kind of restaurant or, developing something that's not as revolutionary. Let's just say if I develop something that's just a drink, right? Like a newly branded, Casper, there you go. Casper, they sell mattresses. Is that a new product? I don't think so. Did it brand it really well? I think so. So I think that becomes, were they a startup? Yes, they were. So I think that is something that, I would love for the participants or people who are watching this to really think about a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments, Alex? Do you think, what Jason mentioned is correct? Do you have any opposing thoughts to it whatsoever?
Well, the thing with startup, I had this idea or this mentality that startup is any new business that you start up. I wasn't even considering the fact that it's like startups are really the start of something new and something that like hasn't been seen before. Like if you open, say, a CPA firm, or an accounting firm, right? Or if you open a new restaurant, that's not really a startup. That's just a new business opening up. Startup is something that isn't really out there in the market. It's different. Like, for example, the example that Jason gave, right? Casper, right? They sell mattresses, but it's not the normal kind of mattresses that you see everywhere. There's a twist to it, right? It's different from everything else. Like, yes, it's mattresses, but it's different. Same thing with Brainceek. At least I haven't seen anything like Brainceek I haven't seen anyone that provides the type of service that Brainceek provides, and type of kind of detail that they put into it. So startup has been, I see what you mean by startup has been overused. And I think it's a good idea for everyone to kind of step back and take a look at what the company actually does and conduct their own research, compared to, say, they read an article about like a startup, right? And they're like, oh, it's a startup. Like, go out and do your own research and figure out what this company does and how do they do it.
I definitely hear you. Okay, I definitely hear you on that. I think the last part is probably the most important thing, where you mentioned the research part. I think not enough people really go into, that type of detail, and that type of preparation. I think the only thing I would say is, I would say there's a, okay, I'm getting very technical here. I would say that you could create the same type of service. Let's just say Casper, or even Lyft. Lyft was created 3 years after Uber, when Uber was already, growing, etc. I would say that obviously they have a different types of a differentiation, and the reason behind the differentiation is because that's how they get the investors to fund it, right? Like, investors just wouldn't fund it if it's exactly the same thing as someone else. But I would say the other thing is, if you were to look at, say, different types of phones, even different types of phones, right? Like, how Apple became, or not Apple, but let's just say Samsung came up, other, phones are coming up. Right now it's Huawei in like Asia, it's a dominant brand, etc. They all sell very much the same thing, but it still allows them to kind of, create, they're still a startup in the beginning, if you know what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, but I hear your point also, so yeah.
Yeah, it's a very kind of niche topic. I'm pretty sure we can spend an hour just talking about that itself.
Next podcast.
Next podcast, yeah. Well, moving on to the next question. Most students are really curious about startup life, and how they can make a career out of that. So, what can you say has been a shocking or exhilarating experience, working at a startup?
I think there's two things. One is it's a good and a bad. Good thing is I've never felt more passionate about something. I mean, it's almost like you get to design exactly what job you want, or what kind of company you want to work at. So this is exactly my dream job and company. I think, as a founder, you naturally gravitate towards, or you naturally shape the company towards exactly how you want it to shape. I've never worked on something more passionate. That's what I want to do. I want to be able to show people different types of jobs. That's a pain point I had. Growing up in Flushing, Queens, only 4 of my friends, on a basketball court went to college. And the rest of them, they continuously ask me, what kind of opportunities are there? Is college even worth it, etc. So that's something that really hurts me, and that's something that I would love to provide to everyone. So that's from the passion perspective. It really pushes me. But I think from a kind of painful perspective, or not so glamorous perspective, every single day you have to, the hours are crazy. The types of issues, every single day you'll run into different types of issues because you're resource constraint, and your expertise constraint. So you have to figure out exactly those types of expertise and such. I think for anyone who's going into it, it's not, I also heard these things when I was going into it, but obviously you don't listen to it because you're saying, I could do this, I could do it better, except this is not, just like when I went into investment banking, I said, the hours, I can do it. And I would say, the best way is just to try it, see what it's like, and go from there.
Yeah. Would you recommend me enter a startup to experience it?
I think to me, I think life is the way I view life is that it's full of separate journeys. And I think that, if you have that type of itch, the biggest problem is you have to kind of cure it, because I look at my parents and they kind of put their dreams aside for way too long. And they become, you get old and you lose them. You lose the dreams and you become kind of like ghosts, like just floating around. So I think that I also believe that you can't move on to the next phase without curing the previous one. So if you had like some sort of itch in terms of working in a big company, I know I had that in Baruch, or you had some sort of chip that you have to prove to someone that you need to work at Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley or something, then that's something that you need to go through. So if startup is something that you'll be thinking about and it's big enough, the chip, then you need to go through with it, see it to the end, and then you'll be able to mature and grow as a person. So
I definitely. I'm actually currently working at a startup in the finance department, of course. And I think having that exposure to a different environment from a corporate setting is an amazing experience. Like for a startup, you're expected to kind of wear multiple hats. You're expected to be decisive, make decisions. You're given a lot more tasks and responsibilities to do. And when you then shift to that corporate setting, it's very different. You have a supervisor, you have limited tasks. There's a different environment in terms of the company culture and etc. So when it comes to startup and corporate settings, I completely understand. And I actually also push students to kind of experience that startup experience first before moving to a corporate setting. So I definitely recommend it as well. Alex, any thoughts or questions?
I actually also worked at a startup, and I can relate very much. I was hired as a marketing analyst, and then I slowly got more jobs and assignments and roles and duties, whatever you want to call it. I got more involved in the social media of the company, more involved with some internal finances of the company. And then I even, so it was a water filtration company, so they manufactured water filters. So I actually had to, at some point, take on I did the packaging of so like physical work, right? It's different, but I think that working at a startup before going to corporate, it makes you a lot more well-rounded. And just getting very detailed, I keep it short. When you get to an interview and you need to talk about your past job experience, you're able to talk about everything you did to a full extent because there's so many things you did, and it's such a wide variety of things that you've done. And there's a lot of directions you can go into from it. Like if you're from using that simple job, I can go into say marketing, I can go into finance, I can go into say working at a warehouse because I did the work. I know what it's like. I have experience. So yeah, startups. I love startups, but there's always that kind of middle ground. Where do you wanna go? Where do you wanna end up? Everything has their own pros and cons.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
We can move on to our very last question for Jason. So basically, when it comes to a startup, it's not easy running it, and you're a co-founder. So where do you get that drive or motivation to continue improving Brainceek, its operations as well as the processes?
I think there's a more offensive answer and a defensive answer. Defensive answer is I need to continue to push and hit the milestones, or else we die and we run out of cash. That's more of the defensive answer. But honestly speaking, look, if that's the reason why you're doing it, then the company's already before the race is already over. I would say honestly, it has to be. That's where that passion kicks in. That's where that passion for what you're doing, and the kind of the will to kind of get it to a place where everyone could experience different jobs, right? Like, two is it's the striving for greatness. I think, as I previously mentioned, you have to want to be great. You have to. You can't just say, okay, I want to just do a 9 to 5. That's just not going to work. If you quit at 5 p.m., if you just leave, then you'll quickly realize that the company just can't grow fast enough, and you're not utilizing all of the opportunities that are out there. I think there has to be a part of you that says, that views yourself almost as great, if not, better than the Zuckerbergs, the Elons and such. And that's something that you have to be able to strive for. 3 is in line with 2. My parents used to always say that I'm very greedy, and I think I am from that perspective. You have to want more every single time. There can't be ever satisfaction. I think that's one of the things that I'm trying to be better at, in terms of there's an outward facing me and an inward facing me. Outward facing me with the with my team, whenever they do something well, we celebrate. I give everyone on the pat on the back, they give me a pat on the back, etc. But inside me, what I'm saying is, okay, maybe we could have done like XYZ more, or maybe we could have done even better. I try to kind of, now I really try to have times where I celebrate. It's not like, and not, go all over, right into, kind of fixing mode right afterwards. But I would say that, that type of greed, that type of pursuit of excellence, because you're never going to get to pure excellence. So it's always a pursuit, and it's always pursuing more and more and more. That type of greed is something that you would have.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree with that as well. I think, your background and experience has really helped push you to strive for that greatness, because I know background, having that experience is extremely important. And I know that through this podcast, you've mentioned your parents multiple times, and it goes to show that, the teachings that they pushed towards you and how your childhood was growing up has really impacted your decision-making now as an adult. So this is really great, as a reason for your pursuit of Brainceek and its opportunities in the future. Well, this is really it for our main segment. We're running out of time for this as well, so we would love to move on to the next segment, which is the rapid honest questions. As mentioned at the very beginning, these questions were not disclosed to Jason whatsoever. We wanted to make sure that Jason would be able to answer these questions kind of in the moment. So he's going to be very honest at this time. He will have 15 seconds to answer these mini questions, and we will have between 10 to 20 questions, depending on how long it takes for him to answer our questions.
Okay.
So, Olex, do you mind starting off?
Yeah, no problem. I just want to preface that some of these questions are short and fun ones. Others are a little bit more in depth, which you could take like an hour talking about. But I think that's what makes them fun, is that you only have 15 seconds to answer. So it's whatever comes to your head first.
Thanks.
All right. So let's start. What is your favorite memory of Brainceek?
First dollar and earn. That first customer. I thought, I was like, wow, someone actually paid for this. I can't believe it.
All right, moving on. Biggest inspiration from childhood?
Kobe Bryant. I just can't get enough of his work ethic. I think and that strive for perfection.
Mm-hmm.
Fair. Biggest inspiration now?
I would say Elon. Elon's someone who I can look, up to. I think it used to be Steve Jobs, and it still would be Steve Jobs because I'm more of a design person rather than an engineer. But that's yeah.
So you're planning on going to the moon? To the gone to the moon already.
Okay. Largest challenge you've ever faced?
I would. That's a good question. Probably get my first internship. I think that's probably it. That was really hard. That Morgan Stanley internship, because ever since then, my resume was more packed, full with Morgan Stanley credit, etc., and it kind of just paved the way for itself. But that first one, where people are like, "Why should we trust you when you don't have any experience?" There's an infinite catch-22. That one was.
Fair enough. What is your favorite hobby?
Basketball. Yeah. Play basketball growing up.
What is your favorite book?
That's a good question. I don't really read books.
Do you have time to read?
I don't really read books. No, whenever I want to understand something, I just Google it and I search it, and I kind of learn about it within an hour or two. But I don't read as much. You could put like something like I don't know, Harry Potter or something in there.
Oh, a Harry Potter fan.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Same here.
Yes. Gryffindor.
Sure.
Gryffindor. I'm a Ravenclaw. Mm-hmm.
If you were a superhero, what would your powers be?
I used to really like, let's just say Magneto or something like that. But now I've really come to realize that, Professor X is someone who I would really want to be. Just being able to change someone's mind and being able to persuade that person from that perspective is 1,000 times more powerful than being able to forcefully, force them to do something. Because with force, the minute you don't have the force, the person just does the opposite again.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, for Professor X, I also like him as well. He looks like a normal person, but when he's looking into other people's eyes, suddenly he becomes the most powerful individual in that room. So it's kind of like he looks normal, but he isn't normal, which is very dangerous.
I just don't like the wheelchair part. I hope I don't think I want that. But everything else is pretty good. So. Yeah.
Moving on. What is one item you could never live without?
The nerd in me wants to say water or oxygen, but and then the second layer is probably my phone. But yeah, I think nowadays it's really the phone. I think I need the internet. That's something that I probably can't live without.
I think we can all relate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the most surprising thing you have ever heard?
That's it. Huh. There's a lot of
it
good
could be like a
questions
fun fact or just something you read.
I would say, something that I read is that's super surprising is the history. In many ways, every single part of history has already been written from the past to the future. It's all dictated already. And if you have a supercomputer, you could already know exactly what will happen, including these conversations. And the reason behind that, hear me out on this. The reason behind that is every one of your actions is a result of either someone else's actions or your past thought. And your past thought or your current thought. Your current thought is a result of past people's actions, right? So everyone's actions is a result of someone else's past actions or their own thought, which is a result of other people's past actions again. Now there's also, genetics and, who you are from genetics, but genetics is also derived from two people meeting together at the right time, which is the result of all the other past actions. So long story short is, ever since the Big Bang, you could already predetermine exactly to this point if you had a supercomputer.
So that was
Since,
and then 15
since we're
seconds.
running, oh, sorry.
I had
What
to
was that?
explain what it was.
No worries.
Yeah, since we're running short of time, I'll just cut everything out. I have two last questions. What does success mean? As short as possible.
Happiness. It's
Fair.
it's a strive, forever strive towards something that you define as being happy.
Okay. And the last one. Who are you?
I'm that's a good question. I want to say that I'm still the guy who wants to try out different things, who likes to play in my grandma's backyard in Shanghai. That's who I really am, and who, thinks he's the smartest person, but doesn't really care about that. Just wants to spend time with my family and loved ones. That's who I really am.
That's a nice answer.
All right, Jason, you actually did a really nice job in terms of answering honestly, as well as being really quick with your response. I was hoping that you would get caught up on some of them, but for the most part, you came through, even with, like the question about the book. Found out that you are a Harry Potter fan, which is always great. We'll move on to the next segment, which is the final segment. So this is basically your time to share with students any opportunities that students can get involved with in terms of with Brainceek, with startups in general. Feel free to use this floor or platform to just let students know how they can get involved.
Yeah, I think quite frankly, I think one is from an involvement perspective. I don't want to. I'm a founder who I don't really like to kind of broadcast Brainceek or market Brainceek. I would love for other people to do it, or other organizations, partners, and such. What I do want to say, though, to be quite frank, is looking back when I was in college, all I thought about was getting into investment banking, proving that I'm not a failure, that since I almost failed or dropped out from high school and such, there was such a huge chip on my shoulder, especially with Asian parents. But I would say that if I could do it all over again, there's obviously a main path for you to go on, whether it's finance, whether it's corporate, etc. Most of Baruch wants to go into finance or accounting or something along those lines, big corporation. But in the meantime, you got to try out different types of jobs. If there's a side of you that's saying, I'm too old to try out, or I don't have enough courage or something along those lines, think about it this way. One, you have all the time in the world. Two is you're either between 18 or 20 to 22 or 23. So you have, literally this is the time that you could fail as many times as possible. And three is, if you're ever going to say in your lifetime that, I'm too old to do something, or I'm not, you're only going to get older. So my advice here is really try out different types of jobs, intern for different types of places, try out a startup or try starting a startup. You never know, and you never know what kind of experience you'll get. So that's my honest thought behind that. And to all the individuals watching this, if you ever want to try out an investment banking simulation, cybersecurity simulation, or any of the Brainceek simulations, just feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or through any link or any email that you guys are willing to share, and I'll be happy to kind of facilitate that accordingly. So I think those are the two things that I really want to share. Just try it out, see where it goes. I think that's something that I would have wanted to do had I done it again. So.
Thank you so much. I think students can benefit from the words that you've spoken about in regards to Brainceek and startups. If there are any last thoughts, last concerns, or questions that you guys would like to ask right now before we close, feel free to do so.
No, I don't, but I would say, okay, with the part where I said that all of history has been written, go on Quora and read about it. And
Okay.
that's what I would say. I don't think I explained it the best, but it's a very confusing thing, but go on Quora.
Okay. Like The Legend of Korra?
No. That's a hot show too. That's actually a hot show too. I'm not gonna lie. Avatar was an incredible show. The first one though, Airbender, that was an incredible show that I watched during quarantine. But but I would say Quora, Quora.
Okay.
It's kind of like a Reddit. Go on it and just Google. Has history already been like all of history has been predetermined or something like that, and it's pretty hot. So.
All right.
Top-notch story.
Okay.
All right. So thank you once again, Jason, for agreeing to be our very first speaker for our professional podcast. It's been a pleasure having you here with us today, and also having you speak about Brainceek as well as startup culture. It's been wonderful. And Olex, any other last words?
Yeah, I just want to say a huge thank you for coming, taking time. We know you have a busy schedule, but thank you for the time, sharing your thoughts, and providing some more insight on what Brainceek is and on how you think. I think it will be very beneficial to a lot of students who are just unsure about what Brainceek exactly is. But thank you once again. It was a pleasure speaking with you and speaking with you, Tiffany. And I hope we can do this again.
Yes, of course.